It's better than nothing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Squat Cobbler, episode 32, or episode 0 in Celsius. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
I am Mike Belinsky at Official Pagan on everything, and we don't use the metric system here, Kelly.
That's right. That's the kind of stance we take on Squat Cobbler. We will come out against measurement systems if we don't feel that they're appropriate.
We will. You take that Canadian propaganda up north where it belongs.
That's right. We're back to Alice. We're on his 15th album, DaDa. And this will be the last of the lost albums, the Coke Alice years, although in doing a little bit of reading before, and I mentioned this, I think, last time we did an Alice review, Alice may have peaked on his Coke with Zipper, and he may have made a bit of a return to alcohol here for DaDa, a little murky, but overall, the album, things kind of sort of start to come back together in the Alice way we're used to for me for this album. What are your just kind of top line thoughts on where does this album fit in the momentum of Alice going kind of different directions?
So it's kind of interesting. So we talked about this a little bit on the last episode of Squat Cobbler, our last recommendation show. I do re-listen to all of these albums a couple of times right before we talk about them. I think for the most part, other than my favorite Alice albums, when I'll listen to one, I'll just revisit certain songs instead of listening to the album over and over the way that I have with Billion Dollar Babies and Love It to Death and Killer and those. This is an album, really all three of the Coke Years albums are albums that I rarely revisit. So I am probably the least familiar with the material on these three albums, barring the Dark Ages, the first two. But these three albums I'm the least familiar with are the Alice solo catalog. So going into each of them, it was kind of interesting to re-listen to it start to finish because it was, I don't want to say obviously I had done it before, but to really objectively listen to them start to finish for the first time. The other two really felt like, knowing that this is the Coke Years, really felt like they made a lot more sense to me. That sort of nervous, twitchy energy that they had really made sense, and it really kind of pulled the whole thing together. Whereas on this one, it's funny you say that this is more of a return to alcohol because it isn't as twitchy as the other two in comparison. And there is a little bit more of the Alice we know, which is apparently Drunk Alice, seeping his way back into this.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see Drunk Alice back.
It sounds terrible to say something like I'm glad he fell off the wagon.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same for me in terms of, so the four you got to kind of treat together here are Flush the Fashion, Special Forces, Zipper Catches Skin, and DaDa. And the first two of those, Flush the Fashion and Special Forces, I do revisit a lot. I like those, like both of those albums quite a bit. And I go back to them quite a bit. Zipper, I had not really gone back and done a re-listen to it in quite some time until we were getting ready for the show. And kind of was like, wow, shoot, there's actually some things I actually really enjoy on this album. And the same thing's true for DaDa, is that it's like, wow, I guess I don't know what kind of, why I tapered off and not kind of doing some re-listens to it. It's not as universally strong as many things that came before or will come after, but there's some pretty intriguing things on this album, and it's loosely a concept album. There's a character, his name's Sonny, that's got some mental issues. You're not really sure if Sonny's the son or the father, and there's kind of multiple personalities. There's a little bit loose of a thread hanging some of these songs together. And it bookends, much like Special Forces, that begins and ends with the same musical motif. DaDa does the same thing with DaDa. And so there's a little bit of that more kind of interconnectedness that we've seen on some Alice's albums, but not anywhere near like you see on From the Inside or Goes to Hell or anything like that. But it's still fairly interesting.
No, and it's funny you say that because most of his records, as we said, especially the solo projects, have had a strong concept or strong narrative thread to pull them together. This album, and correct me if I'm wrong on this because you know a lot of this stuff better than I do, this is kind of a return of the Lace and Whiskey crew, isn't it?
Well, it's a return of Bob Ezrin, which is
Bob Ezrin and Dick Wagner as well, right?
Yeah, Dick. Yeah, so definitely the return. Yeah, because you had kind of the new wave gang come in for a few of those albums.
Yeah.
So now you get. And you notice Dick Wagner's guitar more present in this album, his kind of approach to guitar in this album, and then Ezrin's back, and what we have done before is Alice is always better with Bob Ezrin. Bob Ezrin is Alice's friend. And that's why I think even if this album started with weaker material, Ezrin, who has co-writing credit on over half the songs, including the first song is completely DaDa, is a Bob Ezrin song. There's no co-writing credit. That's Bob Ezrin and Bob Ezrin only. Ezrin and Wagner are back, and so the last we saw of them was Lace and Whiskey, although I don't think I'd have to go back and see if Ezrin produced Lace and Whiskey.
Hold on a second. I think I might have it nearby where I can get onto the perfect source of all information, Wikipedia.
There you go.
And see that if I can pull this up for us. But I'm pretty sure that this is like a return of the Lace and Whiskey Gang. And if that's the case, it's pretty interesting because, like you said, there is the hint of a storyline behind this that doesn't quite come together, which is sort of like Lace and Whiskey. I mean, it's better than Lace and Whiskey in the sense there really is no storyline in Lace and Whiskey.
Nope, the storyline was the cover. And speaking of covers...
yes, Bob Ezrin produced Lace and Whiskey.
Okay, the good Bob Ezrin. Not the Lace and Whiskey Bob Ezrin, in my opinion. But we're kind of coming back here a little bit. But you're a big album cover fan.
True.
We've had a couple fairly basic album covers for the first, Flush the Fashion, Special Forces, and Zipper Catches Skin were no great shakes from there. But real interested to hear what you think about this cover.
So I'm very conflicted with this cover because I didn't like the last two covers, which I'm a huge album cover guy in general, and of course Alice put so much into the artwork and packaging and the covers and everything. So those last two were even that much more of a letdown because of whose records they were. This one, for me, I'm a little bit torn because I don't necessarily... It doesn't feel like an Alice Cooper record cover to me. But the Salvador Dali... I'm a huge Dali fan, so the Salvador Dali painting and anything is a step up over the last two. So I'm kind of torn with it because I do really like the cover image. It just doesn't quite feel Alice to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this album starts to feel a little bit more like Alice again, but there's a little bit of that too. But this cover is just a slight tweak to the Slave Market with Disappearing Bust of Voltaire by Dali, where it's that kind of, you look at it one way and you see a couple people sitting and a couple people off to the kind of the right of the frame, and then you look at it again and you can see kind of the outline of a face. And of course the two kind of Puritan or something looking individuals sitting there are both kind of versions of Alice. So it's definitely a much more interesting one, but yeah, I can see your point about saying that's not typically what you see for an Alice Cooper cover, for sure. But Alice and Dali kind of hung out, so it was nice to finally see a very direct connection.
Right, and like I said, I'm a big Dali fan. I really didn't like the last two covers, so to have a Dali cover like this it's really cool. It just doesn't quite feel like an Alice record when you first look at it. That's all.
Fair enough. So let's go ahead and get cruising through these tracks. So as I've mentioned already, the album begins with DaDa, which we'll also end with portions of this song. Very ambient and no lyrics. It's really a conversation over some a kind of ambient-ish track. Super interested to hear what you think about DaDa.
I really like this track, and it's funny because I had some level of recollection of most of the songs on this. DaDa was not one of them. I could not remember this track at all, and I didn't realize until you just pointed out now that it was entirely a Bob Ezrin creation. But I really like spoken word stuff. Obviously, I like ambient and atmospheric elements to music, so I really like this track.
Yeah, it's super strong, and I'm just kind of trying to play back. I had purchased Zipper Catches Skin. I liked parts of it. It wasn't the kind of falling in love with an album that I was used to with Alice Cooper stuff. And so then I was a little wondering, what am I going to get myself into here as I get DaDa? And then this comes out as the first track, and I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to be very happy because this is a really, I don't know if it's necessarily an Alice Cooper song. I mean, it's kind of interesting because there are about 3 or 4 points in this album that feel that they're in the family of Steven. They could kind of be around. I mean, whether it's the ambience of the song or the tonality or just kind of the overall vibe it gives. But there's several times where you know, they're not replays of Steven, but they definitely kind of feel in that family. And I think DaDa's got that nice connection there. And I think it's a really strong track. I enjoy it quite a bit. And I remember after purchasing this album, hearing this, I'm going like, all right, we're back to, I got an Alice Cooper album that I know I'm going to just love from beginning to end.
And it's funny that you say that, because that was kind of the same thing that happened to me in re-listening to this album, because like I said, I had no real recollection of this track because it's been so long since I've listened to this album front to back. And when this started, I was like, this album's going to be way better than I remember it.
And so it wraps up, and basically DaDa's this, basically a guy's getting interviewed, being asked a lot of questions about his son. He's not sure if he has a son, does he have a daughter, and kind of ends with, so who's my boy? In just a super creepy way, which is awesome. Or where's my boy? And then we move into Enough's Enough. Your thoughts on Enough's Enough?
Again, like a good song. I don't think it's one of the strongest on the record. It's a little bit too simplistic and bouncy for me.
It's got, you know, it's not, I wouldn't call it, you know, it's not new wave. It's not that, but it's not driving. It's not
right.
A driving song. It is a little more bouncy than driving, but still at this point, my Alice hopes for complete awesomeness from beginning to end were not shattered with Enough's Enough, because I was like, okay, I got it. Scary guy in an attic or something. And then Enough's Enough. And it seems to be fleshing out a little bit more. There's a lot more family conversation kind of in the lyrics of it. It is a little bit bouncy. It's also got a little bit better guitar than we heard in Zipper in terms of kind of typical Alice guitar. It is still a little bit, I hate to call it, I don't really want to call it new wave, but it still seems to have at least flavorings of that to it. But it was like two songs in a row. Okay, there appears to be a storyline hanging together here. I like kind of both of these first two songs, so I was feeling pretty good so far.
Yeah, I like the song. I don't dislike it. It's just the first track, DaDa, is really strong. In fact, it's funny because when I was doing a little bit of research into this, I was reading how Alice did not tour this record, and in fact has never played any of these songs live. And I feel like that's kind of a unfortunate thing, because I could see DaDa like being the opening of a show.
It could be a perfect opening to a show. Even if they just actually played the audio, just, you know, actually just as they're getting ready, just let that thing play through. Although it's not a short song, DaDa is actually 4 minutes and 45 seconds, so it's not a little throwaway, but that could get the crowd kind of frothy and ready to go. But yeah, I think DaDa would be. There's another. You're correct in that he's done none of these live. I think there's a glaring omission that makes absolutely no sense to me why he doesn't do live. I will call that song out when we get to it. I think DaDa's a great call, but that's not the one that to me is clearly a live Alice song. But so we've got Enough's Enough. So then we move into Formerly Warmer. Former L-E-E, warmer, not formerly as an adjective. Again, to me, a bit Steven-esque.
Yes, yeah.
In the upstairs room under lock and key, it's my brother Formerly. Kind of a spooky little number. And again, so I've gone through DaDa, Enough's Enough, and Formerly Warmer, and feeling still pretty good about this album overall for me at this point in time. So I like Formerly Warmer quite a bit as well.
We're 100% so far on the same page on this one, because DaDa is such a strong opening. You have two good songs after it. One thing I will say, I think this is a good point, because we're 3 tracks in, to kind of bring up. There really, and there has been before on some Alice stuff, particularly on the solo stuff. I can't think at all on the Alice Cooper group stuff, but definitely on the solo stuff, there has been drum machines on the more new wavy stuff used. Never on an entire Alice record up until this point is it as prominent and apparent that the drums were programmed as they are on this record. But it's not, I don't really think it necessarily detracts from the record in the same way. Like I complained, like to me what keeps From the Inside from being like a perfect record is they're a little heavy handed on the synths. And this record has synthesizers and prominent use of drum machines in it, but I feel like it's a little more smoothly integrated than the heavy-handed approach that we've seen before with some of the synth stuff on Alice records.
Yeah, that's definitely a thread that's very atypical of Alice's to be that heavy on kind of the programmed drums. But it isn't the context of this album and the kind of the overall tonality. It's not for me. It's not a critical failing, but it's if you like Alice Cooper, programmed drums is probably not your cup of tea overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something like I said, I would never picture the Alice Cooper group doing something like this. I don't necessarily think it detracts from this because, again, we're in Alice solo territory that's more about the theme and the showmanship of it than the driving rock and roll elements of it. So not that those aren't there on the Alice solo stuff, obviously, but he's way more into the storylines and the themes and the showmanship. So I don't necessarily think it detracts from it so long as it's smoothly integrated. And this is a lot more smoothly integrated than because there's a lot of drum machine stuff on the new wave tracks on the past couple records that I thought were a little more jarring isn't the right word, but just didn't quite blend together. And I don't know if it's just because they got better at producing him alongside drum machines or if it just fits this material better.
Yeah, and I do think it does fit this music. I think overall, I think the tonality of this album, it does fit, which is just, I mean, he's in a different place in doing this one, but
yeah, I mean, there's synths and drum machines all throughout this, but it doesn't detract from it the same way I feel like it has on the past few records.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because there's more of a storyline or it's more of Alice kind of coming through. Just things like Formerly Warmers, lyrically and storyline wise, a perfect Alice Cooper song. It makes good sense there. So we're 3 songs in. This is a 9 song album.
Decent length too, because weren't the last few like only around 30 minutes, and this cracks 40 minutes.
Yeah, this cracks 40 minutes. A lot, there's most of the songs are over 4 minutes or approaching 4 minutes. So Alice came in and did DaDa, did Enough's Enough, did Formerly Warmer. I'm about ready to get out of my chair and begin to give him a standing ovation for this album. And then basically for the next 6 songs, there's only one other time I'm consider getting out of my seat at all. Snatched it away from me because the very start in No Man's Land, to me, a great example of it is No Man's Land starts off with the lyric, "I got a job in Atlanta in the mall playing Santa." And I'm starting to get out of my chair because I said, that's amazing. That is a great set of lyrics. And then it finishes off with, "Not because of any talent, but because I was the only one the suit would fit," which is still kind of funny, but I sat back down at that point and said, okay, let me see what's going on here. This is, for me, a very non-memorable song. Like I said, outside of those first couple words, which were amazing.
I think you really just hit it and said it's a non-memorable song. I was doing work around the house today, as we were discussing before when we were off air, and I had DaDa playing in the background as I was doing this work, and this really struck me because of the whole Santa thing in the beginning. And I remember kind of getting into it and really listening to the song. By tonight, just hours later, I had already forgotten about this song again.
Typically, most Alice songs are not forgettable. This one's it's just not memorable. It's just
right. And like I said before, with an artist like Alice, who's all about the showmanship, in a way, that's almost worse than saying it was a bad song, saying that it was a forgettable song.
So that's what starts to take a little of the steam out of DaDa for me at this point in time. Anything else on No Man's Land?
Really nothing else to add to it.
So then we end side 1 with a little ditty called Dyslexia. Is this love or is dyslexia? Is the chorus for the song, which is kind of clever, I guess, in a way. You had mentioned when we talked about Flush the Fashion that you thought Clones was a little reminiscent of Gary Newman.
Yes.
I don't know if it hit you, but if not, go back and listen to the first half of Dyslexia again.
Okay.
And it is completely, lyrically, content-wise, no, but delivery-wise, it's a Gary Newman song.
No, it didn't strike me when I was listening to it, but it definitely, in re-listening to this album, this is a song I didn't dislike, but was another example where I felt, and it's a shame because the first 3 tracks on this are strong, especially DaDa. And overall, I feel like this is a really strong record we're getting into. And even though I'm not a big fan of No Man's Land because it's kind of a forgettable song, this is the first time on the record that I feel like, once again, Alice is kind of not carving his own path. but taking a little bit sonically, a little bit more of the safer route and following what was going on at the time. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and this feels like, oh crap, we forgot to put this on Zipper Catches Skin.
Yeah.
This song fits kind of much more with that, the strangest that is Zipper Catches Skin, than on this album, because there's this kind of darkness and foreboding and different things going on with it overall, and then this is just kind of electro pop kind of deal, and it'll be very interesting to go back and listen to that first part and kind of imagine, again, it's all in the delivery. It's not the lyrical content or so much, but this is exactly how Gary Newman, particularly early Gary Newman, used to deliver stuff, in my opinion. And then second half, it gets away from that. There's parts of it that it's got a hook or two in it that's not too bad. But it seemed like a whole lot of work to get to, I got this lyric I want to use called, "Is this love or is it dyslexia?" And I got to put a song around it to get to it.
Yeah, and you hit on that there, where it's kind of like, I kind of have this idea, let's make a song around it. Also, this is definitely a track that feels like it was left off of Zipper Catches Skin. It definitely feels like this is the first time on the album that it feels like he's following trends again. But really, I think you nailed it when you mentioned before about sort of the atmosphere of the first couple tracks on this record. This is the first song to me that doesn't have that. Like, it's almost like that more produced radio kind of sound to it, just ripped out the atmosphere of the songs. And that's what makes this record stand out over the other Coke Years records to me, is we're getting a little bit more of that Alice atmosphere that we had before. Even though this isn't necessarily a driving rock record like the Alice Cooper group days, it has that feel of an Alice Cooper record up until this song.
Yeah, and it was the same thing we saw happen in Lace and Whiskey, is that kind of the seams came apart, and if there was any sort of vibe developing, it kind of went away. And it doesn't happen with the same frequency that on Lace and Whiskey. He kind of picks up steam, and then all of a sudden this thing kicks in, and it's like, feels like, oh, I threw a Zipper Catches Skin track on here for fun. Then we move over to side 2, and Scarlet and Sheba kind of gets back to the vibe, to me, probably the heaviest guitar on this entire album. It is the rockinest song on this album, probably.
Definitely the heaviest guitar song on the record. Yeah. And it has atmosphere again, and an atmosphere that fits the first couple of tracks on this album.
Yeah.
So it gets the album back on track, but at the same time, it kind of underlines how much Dyslexia didn't fit.
Peel Dyslexia off and finish side 1 with Scarlet and Sheba. You got a really strong start. I like guitar rock. This is definitely that. Not some of the same either wit or sinister that you get typically in Alice, but it's a pretty solid song.
Yeah, I would say, like, you could almost say about this entire record, this is not Alice in his prime, but it is Alice. Like, it's the Alice we know, which we didn't get a lot of on the last 2 records.
Absolutely. So he's definitely coming back. And now I am highly interested as we come now to the next song. Often there's certain songs that I end up going one way and Mike ends up going another, and I think it's because Mike's slightly more intellectual than I am. But we'll see how it goes here.
I think you may be the first person to accuse me of that.
Well, I'm a low bar, so don't get cocky. But so, Mike, I Love America. You love I Love America?
I do. I think that this is a really good song. I think it's interesting. I was reading. I think it's a funny song, and I think we're getting a little bit. It doesn't have the atmosphere that the rest of the record did. It doesn't bother me that it doesn't, in the same sense that it did with Dyslexia, where you could really just cut Dyslexia and the record would be better for it. Not having the atmosphere doesn't bother me, because I do think we're getting a little bit more of that Alice humor back. It's not quite as witty as him at his best, but again, like a lot on this record, it's like it's Alice coming back a little bit. I do have to I think it would be interesting, because I was reading that this was released as a single not in the US, but was released as a single overseas. So I think it'd be interesting to hear a song like this come out now in our current climate in this country, and how it would be received now.
Yeah, this might be, if he was going to go back and rework these albums, this might be a good time to do it. Although I don't think he needs to do much to rework this song, because I love this song. It is silly. It is humorous. It's not kind of Oscar Wilde clever humor. It is
Right.
It is over the top kind of stuff. But if you're writing a song about loving America, and you start the song out with, "I love that mountain with them four big heads," that is again, that I that's where I got back out of my chair again, because I was like, that is just awesome. And then there's a little break in the middle where Alice gets possessed by Saul Goodman, and it's the A.B. Cooper's Cleaning Classic Cars. It's their 4th of July holiday sale. And Alice does a quick kind of little run through of doing a kind of a sales pitch to come on down to my car lot to see these cars. And it's just perfect. And he's like, "Come on down, bring your kids to see me and Granny. I say bye. Granny says bye. And the snake says, sss." And it's just perfect. It's just so, that little section's great. I think he could do this song live. I know he hasn't done anything off there, but this is one that he could do live. Maybe not the car commercial part. That might be a little tricky.
I got to be honest with you. Like, it was kind of a shame reading, and like, I get, okay, maybe none of these songs are going to become staples the way that $Billion Babies is a staple of his shows, but I think a lot of these songs could work live, and it's kind of a shame that they didn't. And when I'd read during the preparation for our last show about him saying how he'd like to revisit some of these songs at one point, just because he thinks they're good songs and they need a more of a fair shake, like, I think I would pull mostly, like, unless he was going to re-record entire albums, you could pull a lot of this album and rework it, and you'd have really good, strong Alice Cooper songs.
And we've mentioned, as we talked through that, I'm a bit of a Special Forces fan, Flush Fashion as well. But in terms of like really high-end Alice Cooper stuff, this seems to have the best source material to go back to in a lot of places. As I said, this song is silly as silly can be. I think it'd be great live. And then, so here's the interesting thing. So I missed on Enough's Enough, we talked about what words were used in Enough's Enough, and the fact that Alice typically doesn't do that. And this song ends with him doing what he's done on several other ones, like we talked about for Muscle of Love, where he said, bandages come off today, really feeling sick, always hard explaining all these blisters on my nose, and did it again. And then on this one was probably his pinnacle of that, where he goes, "And I love my truck, I'll do most anything to make a buck. I love a waitress who loves to flirt, they're the best kind, turns me on." I'm like, dude, you've kind of broke the wall. Now I go, right. I don't quite, I guess this is definitely a G-rated song, and so maybe he just wanted to kind of keep it that way. But it is interesting that he decides to do that Alice Cooper weave and not say the word here, but he apparently had no problem during Enough's Enough.
Typically, it's something like this, where he'll find some, weave around it, as you said. So that makes me wonder, do you think using an Enough's Enough was something that was like tacked on just to get some shock attention?
I guess. It's atypical for him. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you're gonna. It's just not something he's done before, and so I don't know don't quite understand what the point is, and it certainly didn't play a critical part in the song. Right.
It's not like it's not like some riveting lyric in the song where you couldn't have said that some other way. So it just felt, this song really drew it to the forefront for me, where I was like, was with Enough's Enough, was he just trying for like a quick shock to get some attention for the record? Because even though like this, there certainly was plenty of music at that time, because now we're talking early 80s, there was plenty of music coming out with profanity in it at that time. So did he maybe feel like, because we've talked about how a little bit more, especially on the solo records, he was going for more of following kind of what was going on in music at the time and trying to keep up with the times. So, in the early 80s, you're talking about there was a lot more shock. The shock tactics that would have worked for him in the 70s are not what's going to work in the 80s. So do you think this was him trying to keep up with the times?
Or he was drunk or coked up.
Yeah, or there's that. Or he's just drunk and coked up, and he's not even sure if he's...
But I can't remember. It's an awkward.
Yeah.
It's definitely an awkward. If you're listening to this and you've never listened to DaDa, get on YouTube, go over to iTunes, do something. Catch DaDa out for sure, because that is, as Mike's mentioned, it's pretty cool. And then get to this song for a laugh and a smile. It's a little gem. It's great, and it features a cavalry charge in the middle of it. which is nice. So there's a lot going on this song. So he starts he kind of has clearly won me back at this point in time, and then we go into Fresh Blood, which is kind of a song about vampires. I'm not a big fan of this song, mostly because I can't pin down who this sounds like, but I know who it doesn't sound like, and that's Alice Cooper. So,
yeah, this is kind of, I guess, like the Dyslexia of side 2, where it just doesn't fit the rest of the record.
So lyrically, it's actually, if you actually go through the lyric, it's not too bad in terms of the storyline being told. But the music, I don't know. I can't really give you a parallel who it does sound like, but it's not anyone I like. I know that. Yeah, it's just, I mean, and it's a shame because this is, I believe, would be Alice's first vampire song. And it's a long one. It's like 5 minutes and 54 seconds long. I was ready for it to be done a lot earlier than that, and it just wouldn't stop.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't hate it, but it's just not a great song. And again, this is an otherwise pretty solid, consistent record, and this is one of the kind of missteps on it.
Yeah, I think so. It's a shame because then we get to Pass the Gun Around. So Pass the Gun Around, which opens up with the sound effect of a revolver being loaded. I wouldn't say exactly, Steve. I mean, but again, that we're back to the vibe. We're back to kind of a lot of what this album has had as kind of usually as an overall tone. And, you know, with the chorus about, you know, pass the gun around and dump me in the local river and let me float away. I like this song. And I think it kind of returns back to what I think was the intended sound and feel of DaDa. It's a pretty nice way to finish the album off.
I like this song. I feel like it's a pretty strong song. An interesting thing that I wasn't aware of that I came across in doing the research for this record, this song was covered by a band called the Mugshots, and their cover was produced by Dick Wagner. So I listened to their cover, which is a pretty straightforward cover that more or less sticks to what you'd expect. It sticks to the original. They don't really make any dramatic changes to it. But Dick Wagner produced it, and when I was reading up on this band, they actually formed as a band because they were inspired by the album DaDa to form a band.
You know, and there's enough there, you know, and that's which you probably can't say for Zipper Catches Skin. You know, I don't think Zipper Catches Skin inspired too many people to go out and form a band.
Probably not, no.
But this is that kind of return to some of the magic that is Alice in terms of he can put some compelling stuff together. It's a little spotty. There's some times where it's a miss, but it does start to kind of come back, and that's a real interesting. I was completely unfamiliar with what you're sharing there. There are parts of this album that are pretty cool, but it's one you don't listen to very often. I don't listen to very often, so big Alice Cooper fans don't go back to it. It's interesting. And then what I do like, and I think that this is, and I'm a Special Forces fan. I think I made it clear that I like Special Forces with all of its flaws. Special Forces finishes with Vicious Rumors, and then we get a reprise of Who Do You Think We Are to kind of cap the album off. Here, Pass the Gun Around, which is finishing out with Give Everyone a Shot. Give everyone a shot. You got to pass the gun around. As that's starting to tail off, all of a sudden you get that kind of that pounding that started DaDa. It comes back. It just kind of like slaps you in the face, and you get the DaDa lyric again, and it caps this really well. And so tone-wise, is like we've talked on a lot of the previous albums, even when they were strong conceptually, the finishing song, the kind of capper, kind of left us wanting a lot. For me, even though there were stumbles a little bit in the middle, Pass the Gun Around brings everything kind of back into focus to the tonality. And then by popping in DaDa the way they did at the end, it really finishes it nicely for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like the way that it ties back into the opening like that. Because again, I think DaDa is one of the strongest songs that we've heard from Alice in a while. So it's interesting that it was entirely an Ezrin creation. But overall, this is a really strong, consistent album. There's a few little hiccups along the way. This is a really solid album, and it's the most consistent Alice record we've gotten in a while.
In moments where it's compelling and carries a vibe and stuff. So and some fun stuff. And it's got I Love America on it. So
which is a great song.
So you get great music and then a song that'll make you smile every time you listen to it. So what more can you want? So if you're a young Pat Boone and you're looking to pick a song off of DaDa to do, where are you going with that?
So for me, there's only one choice, and that's I Love America. and there would be no hint of irony whatsoever in it for Pat Boone.
I don't want to give that to Pat.
No, I get it. It's a really good song. I get it.
So I think you're right, and he would mean there would be no irony in this at all. It would be.
No, he would hear that. That would speak to him. He'd be like, "Those foreheads are amazing."
I want to give him dyslexia so bad, but I think you're right. I think I got to go with "I Love America" too, which just pains me because it's a crime to have him sing that song.
I completely agree, but yeah, I think that's where it would fall.
Okay, so just context for you kids. Flush the Fashion came out in 1980, Special Forces 81, Zipper Catches Skin 82, DaDa 83. Then Alice is going to take a 3-year break before we hear from him again.
And that's 3 years after this release, which he didn't tour behind this release.
So he toured for Flush the Fashion and Special Forces, and that was it.
Mm.
Nothing for Zipper, nothing for DaDa. So this.
Now, has anything from Zipper been played live?
Nope.
So this is 2 albums in a row with songs that have never made it to a show.
And he could be doing Zorro's Ascent and I Love America. He could. Those could both make their way. But that's from Zipper. Zorro's Ascent's the only thing that's got a shot, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I really see the title track DaDa as a great show opener. It seems like a missed opportunity to me.
It would be a really cool way to kind of, because then he can hit that last little percussive beat at the end of DaDa and then rip into whatever he'd like to. Woman of Mass Distraction or $1 Billion Babies or anything. Okay, so we are going to need to place these on our list.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's kind of in the middle for me. So the real question, I'm gonna have to consult the list for a second here. The real question, I guess, for me is, do I like this better than Flush the Fashion? It's a tough one. I think it's a way more consistent record, but I love Clones. I think for now I'm going to put it as my new number 8, right between Flush the Fashion and Muscle of Love.
So I'd like to be unique in thought, and there are some differences in our list. There's the noted tied number 1 thing that we get into every once in a while. But, yes, I know. But so that puts it for you at number 8.
Yes.
And that will put it for me as number 9 because I'm putting it right between the same 2 albums, between Flush the Fashion and Muscle of Love.
Yeah, I like it better than Muscle of Love, but it doesn't have Clones on it, which edges out Flush the Fashion. Okay, so again, pretty close, same spots on our list on that. It was a fun album. It's definitely worth a listen. It's a unique listen. It is Alice becoming more like Alice again, which is very, very cool. He even gets more Alice-y next time we get together. The next time we get together is a very special album.
After a 3-year hiatus, Alice comes back. He comes back free of all chemical and alcohol dependencies. First time he's ever performing not under the influence of something. A little ditty called Constrictor. I know Mike's got a lot of strong feelings about.
I have very strong feelings about it, and I think maybe, just maybe, this could be the tiebreaker for you.
This is going to go about a 3-way tie for first. I don't know. Yeah, I'm good. That's going to be a tough one for me to rank because they're. Well, we'll talk about it. We talk about Constrictor, but yeah. But we're getting into some interesting times with Alice. We're going to get Constrictor. We're going to get the album that shall not be named, and then some other things after that. So some good stuff coming up. There's lots of good stuff. It's Alice. It's always good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's 15th album of Alice's, DaDa, finishing about the same place in both Mike and my list. And we'll be back for recommendations on the next Squat Cobbler, and then after that, we will be talking about Constrictor, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.